Welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Kyle Madsen, and I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today sports media group. Still no Chris Peterman, and we have a Dexter Lawrence trade request to talk about because I imagine the 49ers are at least going to make a phone call. We'll get to that, and then I have a couple of NFL draft things I want to hit as well. Before we do that, though, a big shout out to Lamb Chops. They're the presenting sponsor of this podcast and the official clothing brand of this podcast. SGLambchops.com is the website. Use Candlestick 20 when you check out. That's a promo code to receive 20% off your order at SGLambchops.com. Lamb Chops, join the herd. All right, let's get to this Dexter Lawrence trade stuff. All right, man. So Dexter Lawrence, the star defensive tackle, I should say, nose tackle, maybe more specifically, for the New York Football Giants, has requested a trade. And the 49ers, I would imagine, would my cat start meowing immediately as I start the podcast. It's unbelievable. Oh, there's the Lamb Chops ad if you're watching on YouTube. We'll get to that momentarily. So Dexter Lawrence requested a trade, and I would imagine this is a player that the 49ers are at least going to make a call about, because Dexter Lawrence at age 28 is one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the sport. He has 30 and a half sacks in 109 career games. He had just half a sack last year, but the year before that he had 9. The year before that he had 4.5 in 16 games. The year before that he had 7.5 in 16 games. He is a premier player at his position. He's been a second-team All-Pro twice in his career, and he's been a Pro Bowler 3 times. He finished 9th in Defensive Player of the Year voting back in 2023. He would be a game-changing player for the 49ers, particularly when you consider they added Osa Odighizuwa this offseason for a third-round pick. That said, a report came out after Lawrence requested his trade. A report came out that teams around the league believe that the Giants are going to catch either a late first-round pick or a second-round pick for Dexter Lawrence. And I don't think the 49ers are in a spot where they want to pay perhaps the 27th overall pick to pay a defensive tackle premium money at that position. That's not been a position that they've successfully paid premium money to. They've tried to, they didn't with DeForest Buckner. Instead, they kept Eric Armstead, which, okay, in hindsight wasn't great. I justified it at the time. And I think in hindsight, I would too, because I think the theory still plays. Let me rewind. I think the theory still plays, but in hindsight, you would obviously not do it. But I still understand like the reasoning. I don't think the reasoning aged poorly. I think the move aged poorly because DeForest Buckner is awesome. And Eric Armstead, after his 1 year leading the 49ers in sacks, was never quite that impactful as a pass rusher again. So anyways, they tried to bandage over it with they made the Malik Collins trade, but that didn't keep Malik Collins around. And then they paid Javon Hargrave big money. That didn't work out. Then they drafted Alfred Collins in the second round last year. They drafted CJ West in the fourth round last year. They have traded a third round pick for Osa Odighizuwa. They've made a ton of investments in their defensive line, and it wouldn't shock me at all if they draft a defensive tackle this year as well. I don't think the 49ers are in the business right now of trading for a 28-year-old, soon to be 29-year-old. Not soon to be. He'll be 29 on November 12th. So about 2/3 of the way through the season. Halfway through the season, he'll be 29. I don't think the Niners are looking to pay a player like that in a year where in a couple of years stretch where they're trying to get younger. If they had not made the big investments via the draft last year, like if this was last season, if if Dexter Lawrence had made this trade request before last year's draft, I think maybe the 49ers are more likely to kick tires on it. Where maybe instead of drafting Alfred Collins, they use that second round pick to go trade for Dexter Lawrence, instead get a proven player there and go about their business. But given the way the 49ers have, and again, this is not would I or wouldn't I. I'm always in the camp of go get good players. But when I try and look at how the 49ers have tended to build rosters and how they've tended over the last couple of years to try and get younger and to try and rebuild their depth along the front and to put themselves in a better financial position moving forward so they can continue building a quality team around Brock Purdy once his big contract numbers kick in. I don't think Dexter Lawrence is the answer for them at that amount of draft capital. I think they want to give themselves the best chance to draft impact players on day one and then early on day two because they're not picking in the third round. And they have 4 picks in the 4th round. And so unless they trade up into the third round with a couple of those 4th round picks, like they're just not going to have, I don't think there's a world, unless they trade back, of course, which fine. If they can trade back from 27 and pick up some assets and maybe then you can revisit this. But I think right now the 49ers know that they need to draft star caliber players, like Pro Bowl caliber, all pro caliber players, if they want to be Super Bowl contenders beyond, 2028 into 2029. Like that's kind of the window they're operating in here. And I think they need as many chances as possible to draft a 22 or 23-year-old who could potentially be a stud for them through the duration of their rookie contract and into their prime. And if you're giving up a 1st or 2nd round pick to go get a proven star in Dexter Lawrence, you're limiting your chances to go find that high quality star player on a rookie contract that is so valuable in building a championship roster. If they hadn't made the Odighizola trade, maybe it's different. Maybe you feel a little different. If they hadn't drafted Michael Williams in the 1st round and then spent 2 other picks on defensive linemen last year, maybe you'd feel different. Maybe I'd feel different. But I think the 49ers are in a place right now where going and trading for Dexter Lawrence is not. I think they'll make the call just to kind of see, because you never know. Can you do a 2nd and a 4th and maybe get a 3rd back or something? I don't think the Giants would do that, but you have to make the call if you're John Lynch. That's where I'm at. I don't think you look at it and go, oh, a 1st or 2nd. Well, I'm not even gonna go. You have to try and do business because you got the cap space. I don't think the Niners would want to, but that's what I would advise them to at least make the call, because if you can get them for a bargain draft capital wise, you feel better about paying the big money to have a star caliber player who could push you into Super Bowl contention. I think Dexter Lawrence is that good. And I think with where the 49ers are at, I think they're in a strange spot where they're not quite like Warriors 2 timeline styling this. In 2022 when Golden State had James Wiseman and they had Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, but then they went and won a title. And they were trying to bring these young guys along, and they were going to have this like transition phase from the Steph Curry era to the Jonathan Kuminga, James Wiseman era. Like this isn't that. This is they need to find a second timeline. Like they don't have one right now. If they don't find another star caliber player via the draft over the next couple of years, you're looking at a pretty bare cabinet come 2029-ish. And that's just when I assume players like Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle will be aged past their maximum effectiveness. And I don't think signing those players in free agency or trading for those players and paying a big money is the way to compete for Super Bowls. You have to start drafting those players. And I've been of the mind they've had to do it the last couple of years. I don't know that they've hit on that star caliber player. I think they've hit some good players. But do you see an all-pro here in this group from the last 2 draft classes? I don't. Still early, for sure. But where we sit right now on April 6th at 5:45 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, I don't see an all-pro on this roster. So they're in this weird spot where they need to find that, if we're going to belabor the 2 timelines analogy, they need to find a second timeline Or they need to say, to hell with that. We're going to push all our chips in now and make one last like desperate all-in push with this core of players: Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Brock Purdy. They signed Mike Evans, who's 33 or however old Mike Evans is. Rather going to push all in, and if you're going to do that, then go get Dexter Lawrence. Send the 27th pick and go get Dexter Lawrence and call it good. Figure out the math later. But they haven't seemed willing to do that, because I feel like if you're going to do that, you would have done that in the last couple of years before Christian McCaffrey cleared 30 and before George Kittle entered his mid-30s and before Trent Williams pushed 40. But no, the last couple of years, they've been focused on rebuilding depth through the draft, and I think they're going to continue to do that, which is why it wouldn't shock me at all if they trade back and try and accumulate more picks and give themselves as many chances as possible to find impact level players. So also, just on the, I saw somebody, I'm not going to name the person or the site because I don't know this person personally, but I know they do good work and I know they work really hard. So I don't want to call them out directly, but I do want to call out this take because it's not just this person. This is just the most prominent person that I've seen kind of throw this around. And I don't think Brandon Aiyuk is an asset. I saw somebody bring up a Dexter Lawrence trade where they basically, in more words than this, said, what if they throw in Brandon Aiyuk? Would the Giants do it then? Like, what, throw in Brandon Aiyuk? Like, no, it's a massively complicated thing. Team's got to figure out what they're doing with his contract and whether he even wants to play football anymore. And if you're the Giants and you want Brandon Aiyuk, you're not using him as sweetener in a Dexter Lawrence trade. Like, no, you're maximizing the value you're going to get for Dexter Lawrence. Niners aren't going to go, teams aren't going to go, hey, we'll give you a first, and the Niners go, we'll give you a second and Brandon Aiyuk. Like, I don't think that's where his value lies. I know the 49ers are holding on to him in case someone wants to trade for him, because that's not an amicable situation from my understanding anyway. This is not a scenario where the 49ers are like, yeah, we want to do what's best for Brandon Aiyuk. We want to do right by him. I don't think they're trying to do that. I don't think they give a rip. I think they're perfectly fine keeping him on their roster until final cuts. I think they're perfectly fine with that. And if, say, Washington gets desperate and says, we want him, then cool. Then great. Here, we'll you give us a 7th round this year and we'll give you a 7th rounder next year and we'll call it good. Or we'll pick swap 7th rounders next year and you're going to have Brandon Aiyuk. Like, at least then you're getting something. And I think that's kind of what the trade would look like. Like, this is like, there's two massive, massive question marks with Brandon Aiyuk. There's one, we haven't seen him play since his knee got obliterated in week 7 against the Kansas City Chiefs in 2024. It was 2 seasons ago. We're rapidly approaching 2 years since Brandon Aiyuk's played meaningful football. So and rapidly approaching, like 6 months. But that's a huge question. Like, what does he look like? Is he 2023 Brandon Aiyuk, who's an all-pro and looked like an ascending star at the position and looked like he was cruising into the top 10 at the position and maybe even the top 5, and it's going to change the way the 49ers played offense because look how good Brandon Aiyuk is? Like, nah, I don't think he's that. I mean, maybe, and that's why you'd take a flyer. But that's a massive question mark. Is he even good at football anymore? Is he a third wide receiver at this point? Is he still a number 1? Is he a number, like, what is he as a football player? Huge question mark. And then there's the matter of how everything went down with San Francisco. San Francisco is a pretty good and buttoned up organization. And you're seeing things go off the rails like this. If you're Washington or Pittsburgh or Kansas City or I don't know, Seattle. Like I'm just trying to name teams that need receivers. I don't know. I'm not locked into everybody's 53-man roster right now, but or 90-man roster. Jesus, it's April. You've got a huge question mark of what's going on off the field. Does he want to play football? Does he want to play football for your team? Does he want to show up to rehab? Will he show up and work out so you can see that his knee's healthy? Like what? Maybe it is just a change of scenery. Maybe he hated Kyle Shanahan and or John Lynch so much that he was done in San Francisco and he'll leave somewhere else and he'll be a plus student again. Maybe he'll go somewhere else and be a model citizen. But from the outside looking in, you've got a guy who the 49ers paid and then immediately said, well, we're waiving your guarantees of the for the final year because you're not doing your rehab on your massively reconstructed knee correctly. And then you're ghosting the team. And then you're posting on social media that you're driving 100 miles an hour past Levi Stadium. Oh, that's wild. Like that's not just regular. That's not something a team is just going to go, yeah, we'll just bring that guy in. There's a lot of questions. And the fact that there's no agent has come out and like disputed any of this. There's been no other side to the Brandon Aiyuk story. They're just Brandon Aiyuk and his representation, if he still has it, I don't even know, are just letting this whole thing kind of play out the way it's played out without putting any kind of counter reporting out there. I guess that's rough, man. So all that's to say, I hope Brandon Aiyuk lands on his feet. I wish no ill will on him personally. He's never done anything wrong to me. But I think when it comes to, oh yeah, put him in this trade to get the trade over the hump. I don't think it's that. I think if the Niners are like, yeah, will you take Brandon Aiyuk? We'll attach a late round 2027 pick for you to take him. That's kind of where I think that's at. Well, I think this is we can only give you a second, but how about Aiyuk? Like, I don't think that that's the nature of Brandon Aiyuk standing in the NFL right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but just based on all the reporting and based on well, also I guess the lack of reporting, I'm not guessing Brandon Aiyuk is being traded. My guess is he gets cut as late as the 49ers can possibly cut him. All right. Before we move on to a couple of draft things that I want to get to, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here when we get to the draft stuff. But before we do that, a big shout out to our friends at Lamb Chops. sglambchops.com is the website. And oh my God, the spring 2026 line is out, you guys. I'm just seeing this for the first time. Craig, Jordan, if you're listening, send me everything. There's a new heather gray pullover hoodie with the matching sweatpants. Their sweatpants and hoodie combos are so gas. There's this heather gray knit sweater. If this is anything like the black sweater from the winter line, although this looks maybe a little bit thinner, I'm not totally sure if it's the same one or not. Extremely comfortable, extremely fire. A good way to class up your style. And then the mechanics jackets. I have the light blue one. I just wore it to a concert last night. I have the brown one, and I'm going to need this black one with the gray collar and the white stitching because, damn, that's fire. Craig, Jordan, I'll take one of each. And you know what? I'm going to speak for Chris. I think Chris would as well. And I think everybody listening would as well. So hit sglambchops.com. That's their spring 2026 collection. It is out now. And then once you bag everything in that spring collection, make sure to hit this little search bar here and type in Candlestick. And when you do, it'll take you right to the Candlestick Chronicles t-shirt and the Candlestick Chronicles hoodie. They are exclusive to Lamb Chops. We partnered with Lamb Chops to make merch, and this merch is there for you. We might have some other merch coming this season. So get a head start, get that t-shirt, get that hoodie, and get yourself ready for football season and support the pod. And support Lamb Chops. We'd appreciate the heck out of it. sglambchops.com is the website. Use promo code Candlestick20 when you check out for 20% off your order today. All right. Quick thing on the draft, because we're reaching the point for me personally, where I'm actually digging into the draft now. I know there are sickos out there like Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker from Locked On Niners that have been watching tape since November. Not I. But I'm starting to develop some takes. And just based on what I'm reading and what I'm watching, I've said this and I'll continue to say this throughout the draft season. I don't think the Niners are in a spot. Excuse me. I don't think the 49ers are in a spot where they can draft for need. And let me rephrase that. I don't think they're in a spot roster wise where they can look at this year's draft and say, we need to draft this. Defensive end is at the top of their list of needs. We talked about this on the last podcast. I think defensive end is at the top of the list of needs. I think wide receiver is right there behind it. That said, if Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon, if he's so good, if he is the next George Kittle, I told you last time, Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 is something that I really go by this time of year. I think Daniel Jeremiah is one of the best analysts in the draft space. He has Kenyon Sadiq as a top 15 prospect in this year's draft. If that's the case, the 49ers also have him that high and he falls to 27. Cool. Draft him. That's a potential star caliber player that you're using your draft capital on. You still got to figure out wide receiver and defensive end, but man, you got a star in the building. That's a good way to go. It's a good way to build a team. Get the stars in, figure out the rest. So if that happens, if I'm just going to, not that I think these things would happen, but if Jeremiah Love falls to 27, the running back from Notre Dame, cool, take him. Like, why not? He's awesome. He'd be a really good player for the Niners. Go get him. If the best offensive tackle prospect in the draft falls to 27, cool, go ahead. But I don't think that's going to happen. However, it does look like, based on how things are shaking out in mock drafts and all these draft intel pieces that you see from your Bruce Feldmans and your Daniel Jeremiahs and your Todd McShays, Dane Brugler is one of the best. It feels like the 49ers are in a prime spot, even at number 27 overall, to potentially kill two birds with one stone here and find really good value while also filling one of their top needs. Because by 27, there's usually not like, I say they don't need to draft for need because like you go back to after they traded DeForest Buckner, they were picking a defensive tackle in the first round with the pick they got from the Colts come hell or high water. They were drafting a defensive tackle. They traded back out of the spot that would have gotten them Tristan Wirfs, the offensive lineman who has been an all-pro at like multiple positions for the Buccaneers, and took Javon Kinlaw because they needed a defensive tackle, so they went and got one. And I think that's a mistake. I really do. And I think they've done that a few times. And I think part of the reason they're so good drafting later in the draft is because they stop worrying about need and they just start drafting good football players. And frankly, that's why I think you find guys like Fred Warner in the 3rd round and George Kittle in the 5th round, DJ Jones in the 6th round, Deommodore Lenoir was a 5th round pick, Talanoa Hufanga was a 5th or 6th round pick, a late day 3 pick, Brock Purdy, last pick of the draft. Like it's not, I don't think it's a coincidence that happens. But anyways, by 27, position is like you might have a tier of players that might feature an offensive lineman and a defensive tackle and a defensive end and a wide receiver and a cornerback and a safety. At that point, yeah, then if they're all in the same tier of player and you think they're all roughly equal, then yeah, go ahead and draft for need. And I think the 49ers are in a spot though where they could have, and again, this is just based on some of the mock drafts I'm seeing and some of the analysis I'm reading, they could be in a spot where they could find real value at wide receiver or defensive end at 27. you have players like Denzel Boston. These are all wide receivers. Omar Cooper, Casey Concepcion, that are rated very highly as prospects who could slip to 27. If they're not slipping to 27, maybe it's Clemson defensive end TJ Parker, who's kind of an interesting player because I think stylistically he's very much like Michael Williams, where he's more of a run stopper on the edge, not necessarily a pass rusher off the edge. And he had massive production in 2024. Pro Football Focus. Again, not the end all be all, but these are just numbers I have. As a freshman at Clemson, 35 pressures, 6 sacks. His second year at Clemson, 51 pressures and 12 sacks, 11 quarterback hits. Last year at Clemson, in just 48 fewer pass rush snaps, 41 pressures, 10 fewer than the year before, 6 sacks, 6 fewer than the year before. Still 11 hits, though. 22 run stops last year compared to 35 the year prior and 29 in his freshman season. Maybe he falls. 6'3", 260, powerful guy, can rush from the inside. And maybe you just have this kind of back and forth, interchangeable pieces with Parker and Michael Williams, and maybe that's something Raheem Morris can work with. But that's not bad value, again, based on Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 rankings. I think Parker's at 24. Just want to confirm that. Yeah, Parker's at 24. Just jumped up 3 spots, actually, in the latest rankings. Right above him is a player that I've talked about a lot on NinersWire.com. And I'm not changing my mind here. I'm trying to figure out, I'm just going to kind of talk through this because it's a podcast and that's what I'm going to do. Trying to figure out how the 49ers might make this work, because the more I look at it, the more I think this might be the guy they pick. And that's Miami defensive end Akeem Mesidor. And the big problem with Akeem Mesidor is that Akeem Mesidor, when he gets drafted, will be 25 years old, which is old as shit for a draft prospect. He was in college for 6 years. And it's not just that he's 25. Like, the fact that he's 25 doesn't bother me too much. It does. It does a little bit. Like, you want a 25-year-old means he's going to be 29 by the time his rookie contract's up. That's tough. But anyways, 67 pressures last year, 13 sacks, 29 run stops. All of those marks career highs. But it's like, production matters, but also you're 24-year-old playing college football. Like, yeah, you're going to be physically probably just more dominant than some of the players you're playing against who are perhaps 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, your body changes a lot in that stretch of time. Now, that said, the production undeniable. Like I said, 16 pressures, 13 sacks, 29 run stops, 3 forced fumbles. Like, he plays violent as hell. Like, he was just nasty. Like, you could see where the 49ers are kind of fall in love with him, just with his play style, his ability to set the edge, his ability to get after the quarterback. He plays with a ton of violence. It's explosive. But you look at 2023, only played 14 snaps. In 2024, coming back after that year where he only had 1 pressure and 1 sack, played 44 snaps, coming back off that year, 4 sacks, 25 pressures. And then really broke out in his final season. It scares me for sure, because that could just be a 24-year-old dominating against younger college players, where he gets to the pros and it's just, that size and that violence that he plays with just doesn't quite translate the same way that it did last year for an awesome Miami defense that went all the way to the national title game. Came within a couple of plays of winning that national title game. But I just kind of feel like there's a real chance that the 49ers get to 27. And if there's a run on wide receivers, and if they decide they don't want to go offensive tackle this year because they don't want their first round draft pick to sit a year, or they don't want to use a first round draft pick on a player who might play guard, and then they're not really sure about him at tackle. Like, I just, there's a very real chance that Mesidor gets to 27. And while there are all these warts and all these question marks, it's the best player available while simultaneously being atop the 49ers list of needs, playing a position that is atop the 49ers list of needs. Like, that's just a very real possibility where, man, it gets tough to avoid the player at that point. If he's at or near the top of their board, or he's in the tier of player that they're looking to draft, and he plays defensive end, and he's the best player available at that position, and they see I don't think they would draft a cornerback or safety this early, but they see a safety or corner that they like, but they like him about as much as they like Mesidor, and they think he checks the box of playing defensive end. And again, if you're the Niners trying to talk yourself into this, well, you don't need the guy to develop a ton. You need an NFL-ready guy because you're trying to compete for a championship this year. So if you think this guy who's 25 years old is going to be able to step on the field and compete in the NFL physically, cool, man. Who gives a damn what it looks like when he's 29 and you may not give him a second contract? You can't worry about that. If you think that this player can help you win a Super Bowl this year or next year, or in the 4 years that you have him under his rookie deal, potentially 5 years, then I get why you would take him. 4 pressures and 2 sacks in the Natty, by the way. Pretty good performance from Akeem Mesidor. 6 pressures and 2 sacks against Ohio State. Just FYI. Not bad. Not a bad performance. So it wouldn't shock me at all. And again, I've been pretty anti-Mesidor for all of those warts and all those reasons. But I think that there's a way that if you're the 49ers, you could talk yourself into it. And you could talk yourself into feeling pretty good about it. That said, if it's Mesidor or any one of the receivers in that Denzel Boston, Omar Cooper, KC Concepcion category, I'm going with the receiver. If Mesidor is the best defensive end on the board, that's just me. I go find a defensive end in the second round, or try and trade up in the second round to find a player they like. That's where it sits for me. Or maybe you trade back and you try and land a guy like Cassius Allen. Or maybe you trade back a couple of spots and Akeem Mesidor is still there, and then you feel even better about it. I don't know. But this is a player that I had fully talked myself out of. And as we inch to within 2 weeks of the NFL draft, it just really, really feels like that's the player they're going to wind up drafting. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. I believe I hesitate to do this because I feel like whenever we do it, something goes haywire. But I believe Danny Kelly, draft analyst for The Ringer, is going to join us this week. Can't wait for that conversation. Got a couple of other draft analysts I'm trying to line up times with. So people who do grind the tape and who are digging deep on these prospects can get their thoughts. I'm asking everybody about Akeem Mesidor, so buckle up. Talk a lot about the receivers. Talk a lot about the defensive ends. See if there's any other positions the 49ers might benefit from taking in the first round. Although I think it's pretty clear cut to me. They're going defensive line or wide receiver in the first round. It's just kind of what they've done in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. I don't think they're going to stray from it this year, particularly considering how badly they need those 2 positions. So anyways, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube as well at youtube.com/@Candlestick Chronicles podcast. And we'll talk to you next time. Shout out to Al Roker.